Well, another election day has come and gone, and we've seen some rather interesting results in maybe not some unexpected ways, but really maybe also in a way that is totally amazing. We're going to talk with one of our local New York State Assembly representatives in this week's episode of the State of Greater Western New York Report, where she will explain her thoughts about what happened this past election day. As always, we are brought to you by...
Each week, our community makes history. Each week, you make history. And each week, there's only one source to turn to for the first take on history. You know what that is? Subscribe to the Sentinel right now to discover the history being made in your own backyard.
The Bend and Honey Lake Falls Lima Sentinel. More than just your news, it's your history. Welcome, everyone, to this edition of the State of Greater Western New York Report. Join us each episode as we discuss fantastic topics ranging from history to science to the strange and the wonderful, as well as the treasured spirit with which our region has infused America. We challenge you to consider all things Greater Western New York, from our region's very beginnings to how it inspires, how it empowers, and why it is so admired. Here's the host of the State of Greater Western New York Report, Chris Carosa.
Hi there, and welcome everyone this week to the State of Greater Western New York Report, and we are going to be talking about the state of Greater Western New York, or at least some of the areas that the region encompasses. With us this week is Marjorie Byrnes. She is the Assemblywoman from the 133rd District, Assembly District. First, before we start, Marge, tell us what is new and happening in Albany that you think people might be interested in, at least leading up to Election Day.
Well, so far it's been relatively quiet. We're, as you know, we're not in session, so we are all working out of our district offices, and mine is in Avon, New York. So there's an old adage that goes along the lines of when the New York State Assembly and Senate are not in session, that's usually a good day for New Yorkers.
All right. Well, that's a good adage. I like that. All right, so let's talk about
not much good comes out of it when we're there.
Right. Well, let's talk about the election results from last Tuesday, November 9th, 2023. If you're watching this at some point 10 years down the road, you'll know what year we're talking about. So, from your perspective, what surprised you in terms of the election results?
Well, I really thought that Mark Cassini would do a lot better in his run for county executive. I know that a lot of money and time was invested, not just at the local level, but also at the state level, in order to have a good outcome. And it was disappointing. I went downtown on election night. I went to downtown Rochester, where the Republicans and the conservative parties were meeting. And yeah, it was disappointing, but there were also some good things that came out of it also. While we did not win the county executive, it does appear that a new Republican family court judge, Christine Demo Vasquez, will be taking the bench in January, and that's a good thing. We're sorry to have lost Andrea Ruhlman, but Christine Demo Vasquez will be a phenomenal judge. And again, she won on a countywide basis. So, and then obviously we still have our district attorney, who Sandra Dorley, who is always in there on the good fight to protect our citizens. So we do have the DA's office. We'll have a judgeship. And those were all won on a countywide basis. So I really do think there is reason to believe that we can have good outcomes in the future up in Monroe County.
You know, Bob Lonsberry sent out, I don't know what you call it, a tweet, whatever you call it on the X platform, formerly Twitter. He sent out a tweet to the extent where he said, this year's election was possibly an extinction event for Monroe County Republicans, and they did lose several town seats along the way. Is there a reason that might explain what happened, or is it just the normal demographic drift that we see as more people are voting on the Democrat?
Well, a number of our villages and towns for a number of years have been having more enrollment in the Democratic Party than people enrolling in the Republican Party. So that's just an ongoing shift. So that elections that were close before, that Republicans may have won, now they're closed with Democrats winning. But you know, and I also saw some of Mr. Lonsberry's tweets, and I know he indicated we'll have trouble locating good candidates and recruiting candidates in the future and raising money. And while I agree with him on a lot of things, I disagree with that because I think that anyone who is committed to ideals, not just trying to win office for the sake of having a job and having an income, but somebody who truly cares about the ideals and about uh, the morale, the things that we're fighting for as Republicans and conservatives, won't be afraid to step up to the plate. It will be more challenging, but when it's more challenging, when you win, it'll be more rewarding.
It's funny that you mention ideals. Scott Adams, the cartoonist, recently said that in response to his interpretation on the national election results, he says the Democrats are a party who are willing to do anything to get elected, whereas the Republicans are a party who are willing to stand by their ideology, even if that means losing an election.
Right.
What do you think about that? Is that true? I mean, is that what you see, or is maybe he's out in California, so maybe it's totally different?
Well, no, I do think to a certain degree that's true. I mean, the Livingston County Conservative Chair, Jason McGuire, also put out I still call them tweets, an X recently, and and he quoted another person, but but basically what he said was losing an election means that conservative ideas were unpopular, but not wrong. If a conservative idea is correct, then we have to be more persuasive and we have to argue more for it. And we have to convince people that our thoughts and our ideologies are correct, not give in. So the idea is we just regroup, figure out how to present in a more appealing way uh, our thoughts and our concerns, our way of governing, and that's all. We're just going to regroup. We'll be back. We're not going anywhere, and that's all. You just have to say, well, in certain areas right now, the people may have had some concepts uh, in misunderstandings. People hear conservative and they think radical right or something, and they don't realize that it's just that we want individual responsibility, individuals to take roles in their government and to be a part of the governing process, and not to have just Big Brother telling everybody what they should do and how they should behave and how they should be governed. We want more individual responsibility, and I believe in the long run that ideology, those political philosophies, will win.
So there's another thought that's going on, and I think again I'll credit Berkeley Green for reporting this again on X, with regards to a strange anomaly that occurred at least within Monroe County, and that is the state Supreme Court had a candidate running on the Democrat line who's from Long Island, Margot Garan, and she came to this position. Well, she was running for town supervisor for a town in Long Island. She suffered a stroke, withdrew, and there's only certain ways you can remove names from a ballot, and that's how she ended up here on this ballot. Before we get into what happened, can you kind of tell us more about just that process? How do you get somebody off of a ballot when you don't want them there?
Well, when anyone runs for public office, or you sign a petition, you'll see that at the very top of the ballot, it'll have a list of individuals that are called a committee to fill vacancies. So that should something happen to a candidate, that committee can make a decision who will take the person's place on the ballot. But that only operates for a short period of time, and I don't remember the exact time period right now, because what you don't want, the flip side is you don't want parties and candidates waiting to see, well, if I put my name on the ballot, then let's see if there is somebody in the opposition that comes out. And if they do, and the polls show that I'm not doing as well as I thought, then maybe we can do a switcheroo and I can bring in Joe Schmo, and because he'll do better anyway, and play games who isn't on the ballot. So there are time limits that are prescribed as to when the committee to fill vacancies can operate and under what situations. It's my understanding, and this really is unfortunate, that the lady that was on the ballot for Supreme Court had medical issues, serious medical issues, and as a result wasn't a viable candidate for the office she was seeking in Long Island. And they did want, her party wanted to replace her on the ballot with a candidate who was in a position to run and serve if he or she was elected. And because of the lateness of the time, the only way to do that was to have her run for another office. And by putting her on the ballot here for state Supreme Court, that satisfied the legal obligation, and that allowed the committee in her hometown to find another candidate to replace her on the ballot.
Yeah, so this all occurred, her stroke occurred, I think, or at least it was reported on July 1st. And even in July, I guess you were past this time limit. So there's only certain ways, I think 3 ways to remove somebody from the ballot. And one of them, as you say, is moving to a vacant spot. Well, there was this vacancy here. The Democrats didn't run anybody for this state Supreme Court position. And now, this isn't just Monroe County. It covers a total of 7 counties. And
correct,
she did end up not winning, as you might expect. But here's the thing. She could not campaign. She wasn't from around here. Yet, at one point during the night, she was in second place with 95,000 votes.
Yes.
And it's incredible that people would vote for her. It makes you wonder exactly what. Do they still allow party line voting? I don't even know. I guess that could explain some of it. But the point is that we were talking about ideology before, and certainly ideology doesn't necessarily have a play in this. The person wasn't even campaigning; it was a judge,
right.
And they get all these votes. People are voting by party; they're not voting by ideology. And this is, again, going back to what Scott Adams said. Democrats are playing to win. They don't care about ideology. They just want somebody with a D after their name in the position, so then they could go ahead and do whatever they want to do in terms of the votes.
No, I agree with you. I think that's absolutely correct. And a little bit is, shame on voters for not knowing. But on the other hand, look, no, the 2 Republicans, Alex Renzi and the other gentleman, were out there and they were campaigning. They were all over the place. They had yard signs. And this lady, she wasn't campaigning. She never even came here. There was no desire to even win the spot. It was just to be on the ballot to free her hometown up to find another person because of the medical issue. So you maybe it should have been better advertised, and maybe it should have been better advertised, and even by the Republican Party as to what was going on, so that people weren't confused or misled and thinking that she really was an honest candidate. But it was a little frightening that she almost won. Now, again, had she won, then there's other protocols if a person who is elected can't serve and what happens. Thank goodness we didn't get to that point. but it does show both some of the failings of our election laws. Maybe we need to include another provision that if the reason you can't run, even if it's after a time period, is because of a legitimate medical issue, as opposed to simply political maneuvering, that would be another way to be able to remove somebody from the ballot who wanted to voluntarily leave the ballot, not getting pushed out, and this type of situation wouldn't come up.
Yeah, that's actually a good idea. I see one of our listeners just said that there is no longer a party line vote in New York State, and there are questions that we have. We'll get to them after our break here. If you do have a question, put it in the chat rather than the Q&A, just because I can see the chat a little bit easier, and we'll refer those to Marge when we come back after this message.
Through the mists of time, nature and man have both created and buried treasures beyond the imagination. With the ages, these riches slowly dissolve into mere myths until they are forever forgotten. But there are those brave souls who tirelessly cling to the truth, ever seeking to discover the undiscovered, to reveal what has always been there, to uncover the hidden gems of a land thought forsaken but loved by millions. 50 Hidden Gems of Greater Western New York. Discover the secrets in your own backyard. Buy your copy now at 50hiddengems.com.
Okay, welcome back to the State of Greater Western New York Report. I'm Chris Grossa, and our guest this week is Marjorie Byrnes. She's the Assemblywoman from the 133rd District of the New York State Assembly. One of the questions I think that came up was, well, what ended up happening? What's the rest of the story on this Margot Gando thing? She was replaced by, I believe, another woman to run for town supervisor in the town of Brookhaven, if I'm getting that right. And she lost. The replacement lost 65% to 35%. So she was blown out. In fact, she got a third of the votes that Margot Gander got here on the ballot. Not actually running, but on the ballot. So it's kind of a odd situation. And I'm wondering if there's any way, and I'm thinking of this sort of brainstorming, to do a post-election analysis to see, since there is no party line vote, to see if there's any way to determine if all the people that voted for her voted straight Democrat. I don't know if it's possible to get down to that level of detail.
No, you'd never be able to get that type of information from the Board of Elections, and they wouldn't know either. Or at least not be able to do that analysis. But, as many of you know, I grew up in the city of Rochester. I ran for a judgeship in the city of Rochester twice, the first time successfully. So, I mean, it's, I don't think it's changed much, but even 20 or 30 years ago, if I was campaigning and I walked up to a house, someone would say, "Are you a Democrat? Don't even step on my property if you're a Republican." So I honestly believe that especially in the city of Rochester, regrettably, if no matter what position you're running for, which probably is why the Republicans really don't run anybody in the city anymore. But what would happen is, no matter how much time and effort a Republican invested in running in the city, you always got about 35% of the vote. You never got less, you never got more, because those people who were Republicans and conservatives in the city would vote for you. Those who weren't wouldn't. And the elections came out pretty standardly. So I can see that while you may not call it a party line vote per se, but everyone goes in, they can jump all over the ballot. But I think that there's a significant number of individuals who, once they get on the Democratic line, just go straight across.
Right. It's like, now it's like filling in a test. Standardized.
Yes.
Apologize to the people watching live. They did not have the sound audio on the commercial. That was my fault. Now hear the sound on these things. I'm not going to read.
Are they with us now, though?
They can hear us. They just couldn't hear the commercial. So that's fixed on our end. Thanks for pointing that out. If you have to use the Q&A because you can't use the chat, that's fine too. That's a way to communicate. So we'll do that. March 2024, next year. Let's not talk about the elephant in the room, the big presidential election, or even that. But there is going to be a ballot initiative that I think you have an opinion on. Can you describe what it is to our audience and what your concerns are?
Well, let's say that at this point, it's scheduled to be on the ballot in November of 2024. There is, at least at this point, scheduled to be on the ballot what's referred to as a so-called equity or equality amendment to our New York State Constitution. And it would make a lot of dramatic changes to the Constitution. But what I have done on October 31st is I filed a lawsuit in Livingston County Supreme Court. It has not yet been assigned to a judge, but the lawsuit has been filed both by myself and two of my constituents who live in the Genesee area, challenging the process by which this amendment is on the ballot. Anytime you want to change the New York State Constitution, first, there has to be a bill introduced in the Senate and in the Assembly. It has to pass 2 consecutive years in a row. And then on the third year, it would go to the voters for ultimately their vote and their decision. Obviously, I respect democracy. Goodness knows I've spent most of my life dealing with running for office and for caring about people's rights to vote and trying to protect them. But my lawsuit is to try to remove this from the ballot. It's not on the merits of the Equality Amendment. My lawsuit is based upon the fact that ironically, our Constitution specifies certain very specific ways that a bill has to go through the system before it can be ultimately up to the decision of the voters. And in 1938, there had been a constitutional amendment back there which added our Attorney General's office into the mix. In a nutshell, on July 1st of 2022, this amendment passed both the Senate and the Assembly, and then in January of this year, it passed both houses. I'm challenging the vote from July 1st of 2022. According to our Constitution, before we voted in our respective houses, the Attorney General was required under the Constitution to issue a written opinion as to the amendment and how it would affect other provisions and parts of law. On July 1st, 2022, when the Assembly and the Senate both voted, there was no opinion from the Attorney General. On that same date, the Senate and the Senate requested an opinion from the Attorney General. On July 6, 2022, she issued a decision. On July, I think it was 13th of 2022, it was actually received by the houses. So it was received. Her official opinion was noted 2 weeks after it should have been due. So ironically, in order to change the Constitution, I believe they violated the Constitution. So as a result, I'm seeking to have a Supreme Court judge nullify that vote of July 1st, 2022, and that would, by operation of law, mandatorily remove it from the ballot next year.
So, have you received any sort of response from anybody on this suit? Not necessarily from the judges' chambers or
Right.
whatever, but just have you heard anything, say, from your colleagues in the assembly or the other side?
Ironically, I haven't yet, which I'm kind of surprised about, but because it's a major lawsuit. It's not one of those things that is an exciting topic where you're going to get up and have a press conference and pound the podium and gather the troops to go out and do anything. This is a very intricate legal argument, which I think is incredibly valid, or I would not have been the petitioner on it along with my constituents. So, if people remember back July 1st, 2022, it was a time in our state when we were actually brought back for a special session. We weren't, but we were out of session in June. The governor called us back, and she called us back specifically to have us vote on new gun regulations. That was the reason we were ostensibly brought back to Albany. And once we were back, they added also this equality amendment to the reasons we were brought back. And the only way in order to vote on these was by something that's called a message of necessity by the governor. When the governor issues a message of necessity, it's because something is so urgent, so important, that it can't go through the normal processes. And this equality amendment was not in that category, but notwithstanding, the governor issued that so that at the time we voted for the gun legislation and for this amendment to the Constitution, by issuing a message of necessity, the governor can bypass, and the Assembly and the Senate can totally bypass the committee process that most bills have to go through in order to be evaluated, voted on within committee before they come to the floor of the houses. It bypassed that process, and it also bypassed a 3-day aging period. Almost all bills that are introduced have to be introduced and then wait at least 3 days before they're voted on, so that people know what's in them, so that people pro and con have a right to review it and be heard, both actually legislators as well as citizens and lobbyists. This bypassed that entire process, basically in an urge for political expediency. And that's all it was. They could have brought this any time in that year, from January until June when we left, but instead they brought it July 1st in a special session. So for political expediency, they bypassed required processes and procedures. So what's happening right now is we haven't been assigned a judge yet. My attorney still has to file a document called a request for judicial intervention. And that can't happen until all the parties have attorneys. All the parties have been served. Both the majority and the minority leaders of the Assembly and the Senate have been served, along with the State Board of Elections. And once they all have attorneys of record, then my attorney can file a request for judicial intervention, and then that will kick off having it assigned to a judge.
We have just a couple more minutes, maybe less than a minute left. Can you just summarize what this amendment is supposed to do and maybe suggest why they pushed it the way they did?
Well, pretty much everything that it wants to do already exists in state law. But what it would do, put into our Constitution the right to an abortion up until the moment of birth, and a number of other things. A lot of them. I mean, it is pages and pages of different things that are long, and which is why I'm sure they tried to avoid going through the regular process of going through committees, having the bills age, and instead just tried to jam it through.
I see. So this is sort of like the equivalent of an omnibus bill. It covers a number of things that that they all want to get done. Okay.
Yes.
So
Lumps everything together, and I'm very optimistic that I'll be successful in this lawsuit. But if not, then we'll be back on another day and talk about the merits of the amendment itself.
well, thank you, Marge. Thank you all for listening and watching and asking your questions. Just remember, if you want to be a member of the live audience, you can do that. Just go to stateofgreaterwesternnewyork.com, sign up for the registration. It's free, and you will receive every Thursday morning the secret link to our live studio, so you can see this program as it is being created live. And that's when you can ask questions and we'll relay them to our guests. Otherwise, I realize a lot of people work and watch it during the day, during lunch. You could always check our site out and see our archived episodes that will be there. Or if you like our Facebook page or subscribe to our YouTube channel, this show is rebroadcast every Sunday at 1:30 p.m. That's right, in the afternoon, not in the morning. And you'll be able to watch it there as it's being rebroadcast. Like I said, if you like the page or subscribe to the channel, those platforms will notify you when it is being aired. You can see it there. Well, that's all we have for this week. Thanks again, Marge, for being here, being a part of today's show. And thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time around.
Bye-bye.